On today's episode, we learn a new lesson about the meaning of life. That it's basically just a really long game of King of the Hill, where some no-good bastard is always coming to take what's yours. And yet the solution to this problem is right in front of us. Preemptively stab everything. If your neighbor says, "Hey, that's a really nice porch goose you have there," can't be trusted. If it breathes, it is eventual competition, because we may all be crabs in God's boiling pot, but you will not find me at the bottom. Now the run formally starts with our brave and devoted wolf moping at the bottom of this well, before Dr. Emma reminds him he has a goddamn job to do. Then it's just a brief stealth section standing between us and a reunion with our primary weapon. On top of that, the kid gives us a magical health gourd, and we begin phase 2 of our plot, getting the fuck out of Japan. But we do hit a pretty serious snag when I die to the first real enemy. Embarrassing. Thankfully, he is not the main character, so round 2 goes perfectly smooth, and after a little more creepy crawling, I descend into the canyon to find the only door exiting this region, because Sengoku-era Japan apparently had really shitty urban planning. And unfortunately, when there's only one way to go, the feds know exactly where to stand, and Officer Ginichiro is here to confiscate the child we've kidnapped. So while I tried my very best, it wasn't quite enough, and Ginichiro ends up removing the wolf's arm and emoting on his dying body. Fast forward an indeterminate amount of time, and a fellow cripple has saved our life and gifted us the shinobi prosthetic. You know, that thing we're not going to use. Actually, I take that back, because the prosthetic does include a built-in grappling hook, which is fair game. If you were wondering whether you can beat the game without this, I'm gonna let you think about the answer yourself. Now the main issue from here is that we are broke, so it's gonna take a lot of violent thieving to get us back in the saddle. And before long, we happen upon channel member Ruval Baka minding his own business. A perfect victim. Unfortunately, I horrendously botched the sneak attack, so he has a fair chance. Thankfully, I think this was around the time I started to actually warm up after a few years away, so it doesn't take long for him to drop our prayer bead and gourd seed and send us on our way. The entire area that follows is kind of a chaotic nightmare, I won't lie, so I'm just trying to snag the hidden basement money and the magical bell so we can keep moving. And after disposing of his handlers, it's time to deal with the ogre. And funny story about this mini-boss, on my initial playthroughs of the game, I was under the impression that you couldn't deflect their attacks. I don't know why I thought that, I just did. As you can imagine, that made them much harder than they needed to be. Now that I know better, it is a pretty mindless dance to victory. Then we have to cut back to Firelink Shrine and chat with Dr. Emma, who has become a channel member in the interim. How convenient. And she asks us what exactly is wrong with our face. We tell her we don't know. She empowers our gourd, and we can get back to work. Now another Ashina general is hanging out past the ogre, surrounded by his vicious goons, so we put ourselves through another lengthy stealth section to clear the place out before the real battle can begin. And due to his co-worker already having shown me the secret sauce, Mr. Yamauchi doesn't have any secret tricks left in the bag and gives his life for his country. Then it's on to the silly snake section, where I do something truly immoral, and we exit the cave as fast as we can. Now talk about being unable to catch a break. On the immediate other side of the snake cave is a fella who I have reason to believe is named Yobo, and he really doesn't want to let us pass through. So this, being the first real boss fight of the game, is where you'll start to actually feel the lack of prosthetic tools. Because the devs have been pretty generous about signposting leading up to this, that the easily attainable firecracker tool would make it much easier. With that said, I think this guy is a pretty good early comprehension check, and most are probably better off doing it raw. The same cannot be said about the fat piece of shit up the hill, but we'll get to him in a minute. With the doorman down, we can explore the area more freely and chat up the local Tangu, who tells us that little people are not real people and asks us to help get rid of them, which seemed a little extreme for my taste, but I'm not trying to anger a demon, so we get to work. Now the first two in the pack can be taken down with stealth death blows, but the final rat creates a real problem, because without the axe prosthetic to split his shield hat, he is very hard to deal damage to, as he's considered blocking anytime he's facing you. So this was about a 3-minute run around trying to whittle him down by catching him in the side, and while it may not have been pretty, it was eventually effective. So the Tangu gives us a book to say thank you, and we're back on our merry way. Regrettably, this means we have to shift focus to the Blazing Bull, who I think was actually meant to be an Elden Ring, the way he constantly fucking runs from you. And in a perfect world, we'd stun him with the firecrackers and call it a day, but this time around we just have to run him down, keep whacking, and keep eating the fire damage until the job is done. Now with our passage into the castle secured, we can goof off for a moment before getting the drop on our third general. But at this point, this guy really has nothing to answer us with, and receives a sizable reduction in rank. Further up the castle rooftops, we take the fight directly to Bird Gang and dodge the Woo guy before sneaking into a back window. Inside, we punish the elderly for moving too slowly, practice our technique on the samurais in training, or whatever these dudes are, and before long, we're face to face with an Ashina elite. And what he does is swing his sword really, really fast. But if you can be even remotely patient, this makes him very easy to build posture damage on, and he can be disposed of about as quickly as a Miss Noble. Weirdly enough, that guy is the final obstacle between the wolf and Officer Ginichiro, who is trying to get the child to testify against us. We're gonna have to put a stop to that. So with Ginichiro sort of being the first genuine skill check of the game, prosthetic tools can definitely be a little helpful, but he's not particularly weak to any one of them, meaning the fight shouldn't feel too far off from the usual. With that said, I am still complete dog water, so there's a relatively even exchange of blows as we dance our way through the first two phases. And if anything, phase 3 is actually a little bit easier. Just don't botch the Makiris, don't miss the lightning reversals, and you should be able to cinch the deal without too much pain. After which we are finally reunited with the boy and can progress our plot to leave Japan. Unfortunately, he wants me to do a bunch of fuck-ass bullshit beforehand, and since he's technically our boss, we don't really have a say in the matter. So we stop to talk shop and slam brews with Mr. Ashina himself before praying to the Buddha and heading back in time to discover some more about our mysterious past. And the Hirata estate is a little bit of a treasure trove of prosthetic tools, so keep an eye out, but we're obviously not worried about it. The place is also absolutely stuffed with vicious dogs that we won't be able to shuriken, meaning we need to stay vigilant. Around the halfway point of the area is the Shinobi Hunter and Friends boss fight, so run in circles swinging wildly until you can dispose of the ads, and the boss himself is just here to make sure we've unlocked Makiri counter, which we have, so just step on his spear a few times until the conflict comes to its natural conclusion. Then, before we can get to the serious stuff, there is one more secret stop to make, because atop this lone pagoda is one of those cool purple ninjas. And I include this fight because I've come to learn that these guys can be a bit of a pain in the dick for newer players especially. You know, the way they twist and turn all over the fucking place can be a little hard to read. And also, I find a lot of people don't know you can Makiri counter their straight kicks, which is basically GG's half the time you land it. Also, he's guarding the most stylish prosthetic tool in the game, if that's your sort of thing. Back down in the fray, we talk to our incredibly suspicious father, take a side path around to the estate's main hall, and run into the freak of nature that is Juzo the drunkard. But in all honesty, Juzo isn't really the problem. It's this guy with the plank of wood. Because again, without the axe prosthetic to break through them, any shield enemy in this game becomes a major issue. It got so tiring trying to work around him that eventually I asked this other Japanese guy, who just sort of stands here, to tag in and help, but by then the mental damage was already done. Going into attempt number 2, the ideal outcome is that we sneak around to the rear of the pack where the shield guys hang out, and stealth attack them both before the party gets going. But this is not an ideal world, so we don't quite seal the deal. Plan B, run around and find your openings to clear out everyone else until it's just the two of them again, and try to tough it out before realizing that this is genuinely fucking impossible, and that abusing their AI is the only option we have left. So we go far enough away for them to start resetting themselves, after which we can sneak back in and lay Shield Boy to rest so that the actual battle can get underway. And it's really not that crazy. He's got a couple tricky timings to watch out for, and he hits pretty goddamn hard, but it's all perfectly manageable. Now the shocker, he is not the final boss of the area. That would be this AARP flavored broad who goes by the name Lady Butterfly. And Lady Butterfly is one of very few bosses in the game with a major weakness to the first prosthetic tool, the shuriken. And I don't think we're going to learn much from the footage of my first attempt, because I was clearly trying to do some kind of meme run where I just spammed the spinning weapon art over and over. And I genuinely, at the time of writing this, the footage is a couple months old. I don't remember why I did any of the things I did. Whatever the joke was supposed to be, I forgot it. But what matters is I got what I deserved. Getting serious again, since we can't use shuriken to knock her down when she's dancing through the air, be very attentive to what she's doing up there, and try to stay pretty mobile whenever possible. When phase 2 hits, and you've also already used your only snapseed, just run in circles until the smoke goblins dissipate, try to avoid the butterfly barrage, and stay consistent on her until the job is done. Then, as we stop to gawk at the plummeting Buddha, we're stabbed by a comically large sword and put down for the 3 count. Thus ends the memory. Now back in the even shittier real world, we need to get to Senpou Temple, which means running through the spooky dungeon, doing a little trolling on the local guards, and hitting the convenient elevator. Then right outside is a goober by the name of Kotaro who wants some help picking flowers. But we'd actually need prosthetic tools to properly finish his questline, so unfortunately, he's out of luck today. A little further up the hill, we discover the colony of peaceful monks that call this mountain home, and decide to introduce ourselves. Now surprisingly, these boys do got hands, but at the end of the day, it's nothing we can't handle, and there's little trouble making our way higher up the mountain until we confront the Armored Warrior, a boss who has the distinction of being impervious to physical damage. Now, some prosthetic tools that help build posture damage might still be handy here, but in general, this is just a deflect buffet until we can line him up properly and boot him off the bridge. Rip to a real one. And I'm starting to get the feeling that these monks are not as chill as they're cracked up to be when I find their chamber of vicious Wolverine slaves, where I heartily recommend clearing all the little guys out first so we can have a proper bully session with the daddy and secure our prayer bead. But these are just side quests on our way to the real big bads of the area, the folding screen monkeys. A boss that, despite the fact I've beaten this game several times, I never really learned to fight properly, so instead of intuitively solving the puzzles, we haphazardly touch things whenever we get the prompt and take advantage where that applies, but most of our time is going to be spent running the little goofballs down. Because it turns out that they were guarding a secret pocket dimension where we can find this random child, but more importantly, the Mortal Blade, which is the sword with the busted weapon art. Then we can down some mysterious palm rice and hit the road. Back by Ashina Castle, you can actually return to the game's tutorial area to find that they have considerably beefed up their security. The spear prosthetic can finally be looted from this little hut, watched over by the big spear master up the hill. And this is another one of those fights that just wants to make sure you fully understand how broken Mikiri counter is, so assuming that you have it, this gentleman will be chewed up pretty quickly. Now I hope you're feeling sentimental at this point, because we even get to return to the very moat where this fever dream began, only to find that channel member Masterpiece Mike is already down there having a chill sesh of his own. And I feel a little bad about harshing the mellow, but we gotta do what we gotta do. And given how much stronger we've become since our last Lone Shadow encounter, at least he doesn't have to suffer for long. But we weren't just here for the memories. We are here to swim into the underground, cast ourselves into a gigantic fucking pit, and then saunter through a poison hellscape. I can hear you asking why. Well, because this is the only path that takes us to the lower village. Again, whoever's job it was to map out this empire is less than human. Now the poison pit presents some fun and interesting new challenges, with the boss of the area being one of these snake eyes gals. And the best piece of advice I can offer is to make sure you deflect these grab attacks, or you will be here for quite a while. With that said, the fight should play out as normal otherwise, and we'll be moving on. Now in the picturesque Mibu forest, a strange mist seems to have rolled in, and apparently, we're gonna make that our problem. So we battle the tree chickens, kill the dead, and have a generally annoying time finding our way into the central building where the Mist Noble resides. And I am not going to make a hacky joke about the boss's difficulty, because I'm about 7 years too late. Instead, I'm going to beat him to death with God's favorite combat art, so we can move on. Because killing him gives us access to the Mibu village proper, and its wacky set of supporting characters, to include another Lone Shadow, the Basket Man, and the Ghost Monk, who is honestly a bit of a fucking animal. Now she's generally very weak to the stun caused by firecrackers or other consumables, but we're not bothering with all that, which I've learned drags this fight out considerably. Combine that with some lengthy combos and tricky timings, and you've got a fight that is sure to challenge whatever portion of your prefrontal cortex remains unrotted. With all that said, it's hardly a ball stomper. I think you'll learn it pretty quickly. Now she was standing guard over this cave, which contains the smelly, auspicious stone that our legal owner would like us to bring to him. How convenient. So it's time to go home and spend our bread, secretly listen as Dr. Emma calls her patient a slur, upgrade our gourd, and get back out on the road. And I hope you like the idea of bringing a sword into what is unequivocally a series of gunfights, because that's what we're going to do. When it comes time to fight the second Snake Eyes, I strongly recommend guiding her to this lower cubby out of view of the many snipers, where she'll be easier to handle, provided you can counter her one dangerous move, just like we discussed. Now when making movement to and through the gun fort, the prosthetic that would be most helpful is the umbrella, because it completely nullifies the only challenge. In our situation, however, prayers will have to suffice. But honestly, once you know the path, you can pretty easily jump your way through the compound and reach the checkpoint, putting this all behind you, with the only remaining obstacle being the long-arm centipede giraffe, who exists solely to break the camera and be a victim. And now for a callback, it turns out that the one-eyed snake from earlier is still pretty pissed off and is going to force us to take the long way around through Sunken Valley. But that's cool, because it allows us to trek through possibly the most beautiful set piece in the game, which is only slightly ruined by the gun monkey harassing us from the other side. But he's really just a prelude to the far more intimidating sword monkey at the bottom of the valley. Guardian Ape, back in the day, had a bit of a reputation for being a filter, due to his erratic movement and vastly different two phases. And while you'd typically lean on the shinobi firecrackers and loaded spear to give you an edge, we just need to make sure our spacing is tight and we are spamming that left bumper. Make sure you watch out for his big grab, as the tracking can be a little generous, and phase 1 should wrap up in only a couple minutes. Once the sword phase is underway, no matter what else may go wrong, do not miss out on these downward slams, because with a boss that spams a keep away AoE this frequently, we do not want to lose our only good damage window. On a side note, I really never used Mortal Draw as often as you probably should when learning the game, so I am genuinely just now seeing how incredibly fucking broken it is. And one final deflect allows us to grab that boy's worm and leave him for the fishes. And with him having been guarding our last magical MacGuffin, we're ready to return to Ashina Castle, only to find it under siege by the Interior Ministry, who I know sound like a bunch of bureaucratic dorks, but are actually spooky ninjas. Naturally, I largely ignore them while looking for the path back inside the main building, only to choose the worst possible window to hop in and lock myself into battle with two lone shadows who, oh look at that, have poison now. So we find our way around into the correct window, stunt on the pet ogre for style points, and we can do this fight the way God intended. By using the puppeteer skill, we can turn the shadows against each other and eventually get this down to a one-on-one fight, which, while still annoying, is perfectly manageable. But the curveballs are not done being thrown, because it turns out that our comically large and deeply suspicious father is not actually dead. Even worse, he wants us to betray the little nerd we've been running errands for. But I didn't go through all that bullshit just to side with the boomers now, so we've got a fight on our hands. And a lot of the fun of this fight generally is that Owl loves goofy tools and tricks just as much as we do, and can replicate several prosthetic tool abilities while being vulnerable to them himself. But in our predicament, the fight is more like getting to experience the terror of being a typical Ashina goon. So keep on your toes, do not let Owl break your posture, and also be very careful with your thrust attacks, because he is the only other person to have mastered the Makiri counter. With all that said, he actually gives some pretty generous attack windows, so with consistency, putting the old man down shouldn't be too much trouble. And I'd say that his death launches us firmly into the game's third act. So we slam some brews with Emma and Ishin to celebrate, create the magical incense, because if I haven't mentioned, that's what we've been doing, and head back to the wedding cave for a little surprise. On a side note, I have no clue what this thing is. If I have any lore heads in the audience, I would genuinely like to know. And the gate guard here in the Fountainhead Palace is the true corrupted monk. A moderate upgrade to the Force Ghost from earlier, she is less vulnerable to many of the prosthetics and consumables that used to work quite well. But as you can imagine, that doesn't affect us very much, so we're just focused on building posture damage the old-fashioned way. And thankfully, her long-winded combos allow us to do so in pretty minimal time. In Phase 2, I was overjoyed to actually land the plunging death blow, because I don't know how, but I managed to fuck that up about 4 times out of 5. Phase 3 sees the release of the worm and a general uptick in aggression, but outside of the tear juice that can be dodged relatively easily, it's a lot more of the same, and we're able to set the monk free. And while gaining entry to the palace is pretty neat, in classic FromSoft fashion, it's had a little bit of a fall from grace. So we need to put a lot of fishmen out of their misery. And I like the little stealth section that this turns into. It's probably the most stimulating one in the game, not that that's saying much. Just try not to grow too impatient, and you should breeze right through it. The fishmen in the next section love trying to make you play soccer, so make sure you give them a proportionate response. And after one last silly little swim section, we finally have access to the Divine Realm itself, home to one of the better gimmick fights out there, where you spend Phase 1 whipping baby dragon men to death with the bodies of their friends, and Phase 2 caught up in the vibe. Predictably, our limitations have no real effect on how this fight goes. You just repeatedly hurl lightning at it until you can rip its tear duct open and retrieve the last piece of the puzzle. Naturally, Miyazaki is allergic to the idea of anything going well ever. So while we were away, Ishin finally died of old age, and a full-scale invasion is underway. So I took a trip to my favorite cave to relax and review my options, only to find that that fucking monkey isn't actually dead yet. This was also the point where I realized that I probably should have disallowed combat arts as well, because 3 hits of the Mortal Draw gives us an immediate trip into Phase 2, where the other monkey shows up. And for this encounter, I think that the Shinobi Firecrackers are basically considered essential, because these two are clearly not meant to be raw-dogged at once, and a little stun could go a long way, but with a touch of patience, we can run them around while finding openings to hit the brown one, letting us get back to a proper duel. And as quirky and fun as it is, they did not give him any new moves, so there's no new learning we have to do before we can sever Homeboy's immortality and put him to bed. Now back to the civil war raging outside. Our primary goal is to reach the one door out of Japan, just like before, but there is a minor pit stop we have to make beforehand. Because our old cripple friend who gave us the magical arm has, let the devil out. And in full transparency, I think I kind of forgot I was making a quote-unquote challenge run at this point, because I opted for the cheese this time around. By baiting the demon into this cubby here, and then leaving while staying tight to the wall for a moment, we can get him stuck. Then we begin the arduous process of trying to jump up this tower. Once you're there, the goal is to jump from here onto the arena wall. And you'll almost certainly fuck this up a couple times. Don't get discouraged. The proper strategy is to kind of run off the side at this angle so you get one more step off the air before your jump, then hold your grab button to grip the wall. Then we can run to the other side and provoke the demon into leaping off the cliff. No prosthetics required. We'll fight him for real next time, I promise. And once we make it back to the tutorial area once again, the final mini-boss between us and the door is a spear guy and his little crony. And I don't know if he just genuinely is a beast. I know I couldn't land Makiri's for the life of me, so attempt 1 ends with getting bodied and then accidentally suicide rolling into the fire. So we opt for a stealthier approach on round 2, turning the crony into our puppet, who honestly gets some pretty good licks in before being egregiously bullied into the dirt. But his sacrifice was just the pick-me-up I needed, and I remembered the ancient art of pressing the B button, so the spear was not long for this world. Meaning we can progress to the door and reunite with the boy, just one small hiccup. Ginichiro is back and has stabbed him with a magical sword of his own. Pretty ballsy move considering how this went for him last time, but you gotta respect the gusto. And to his credit, I was not mentally prepared for his mortal draw, so the fight has a pretty rough opening. Followed by the expected mollywhopping and the transition into one of the best boss reveals in gaming. Like, I don't even know how to joke about it, because it's too absurd to be subverted or parodied, but it's also too beautiful to be mocked. Like, I am annoyed by its quality. So I guess we'll just move on to the actual fight. And in Phase 1, I really think the best strategy is to just rely on your swordplay fundamentals. He's going to give you plenty of opportunity to build clean posture damage without demanding too much in the way of precision. On the other hand, back in the day, a lot of new players, myself included, leaned pretty heavily on the umbrella prosthetic for the last 2 phases, for its ability to eat some of his crazier attacks and put out some decent counter damage. But with that off the table, our only option is to, get good. And in a genuine shock to myself, this really wasn't going half bad. Like any battle of attrition, it had its hiccups, but consistency was winning the day. In classic YouTube video fashion, we even had the old fucker down to a single hit left on his posture bar before fumbling the bag. Followed by a flawless performance on the next Ginichiro phase, you might assume I was getting locked in. But, Miyazaki wanted to make sure I worked for it. And I can't really be mad at that, because even if I am the only one autistic enough to derive joy from it, this gave me quite possibly the most stylish finish this fight can have. And with one last dramatic slash, we can return to the boy and sever the ties of immortality. Because, if I forgot to mention, that's what we've been doing this whole time. Meaning, I can beat Sekiro with no prosthetic tools. I'm sure a few of you guys watching have done this run yourself. What did you think about it? And do you have any other run recommendations for the channel? Because I have quite a few I want to do, but at the moment those are mostly focused on Fallout, so if you prefer the Souls-likes, let a brother know. Lastly, everyone make sure you give the channel members a big ol' kiss, right on the bridge of their noses, really make them feel weird, and I'll talk to you guys later.